Welcome to Blue Blood, the channel where we are going to be talking about Hungarian aristocracy and how they are intertwined with European history. Now, the reason I decided to start this channel is because I've noticed that when it comes to European history, we see mostly English and French history on TV, the internet, Netflix. So the goal of this channel is to show you something that is not English or French. My name is Ádám, and in each episode I will introduce you to one very influential Hungarian aristocratic family while walking through their former castles. Finally, at the end of every video, we will see the demise of said aristocracy under the communism after World War II. I would like to make it clear that certain historical matters are far more complicated than I could possibly explain without making you too bored, so I will not be too invested in little details. So without further ado, let's dive in. Here we are in Szatmár County, the ancient nest of the family. The predecessor of this castle was built in the 15th century and was later reconstructed a few times until it reached its present form in the 19th century. The family traced their lineage back to the 9th century, but they only started to play a more important role towards the end of the Middle Ages, taking on religious and court positions, and they were elevated to the rank of baron in 1609. Previously, in the 16th century, the Kingdom of Hungary came under the rule of the infamous House of Habsburg. Much later, in 1703, a war of independence broke out against the Habsburgs, which was led by Ferenc Rákóczi, a descendant of one of the most prestigious families of Hungary. His attempt to overthrow the Habsburgs coincided with the War of the Spanish Succession, and Rákóczi was even supported by the King of France, Louis XIV, who wanted to weaken the Habsburgs in their fight for the Spanish throne by supporting Rákóczi's rebellion. When the War of Independence started, the governor of Szatmár County and owner of this castle was Sándor Károlyi. First he fought against Rákóczi, but later sided with the rebels, and his castle became one of the headquarters of the rebellion. Later on, however, Louis XIV withdrew his support of the rebellion. Now, I would not like to go into the complicated details, so what's important now is that after years of fighting, Sándor Károlyi thought that they could not stand their ground against the Habsburg imperial forces. So, he bowed to the Habsburgs again and led the peace negotiations between the court and the rebels. For his services in achieving peace, Sándor Károlyi was elevated to the rank of Count in 1712. As the family's prestige and power grew during the 18th century, they started to turn to west and purchased estates in the center of the country, closer to the capital and the court in Vienna. This estate was purchased by Count György Károlyi in 1834. Now, this period is known as the Reform era in Hungarian history, when progressive thinking nobles initiated a series of social, cultural and economic changes despite the resistance of the Habsburg court. These nobles stood up for equality before the law, development of the educational system, the taxation of nobles, which did not exist at the time, and they founded several cultural institutions. György Károlyi was among these politicians, and he was one of the founders of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, which is still one of the most prestigious institutions in the country. Okay, so listen, this was not planned at all, but me and my lovely crew of 2 people decided to stay the night in the castle. Now, I'm not gonna show you our room because it's a mess, but what I am going to show you is that we have 2 very nice pictures in our room. The first one is this gentleman. I tried to find out who he was, but I couldn't, most probably because he died very young, at the age of 28. And the second one is this photograph. Now the only thing I could find out that this was taken in the 30s, but obviously he was a member of the family, and it's a very nice picture. And now here we are in the beautiful Budapest. This palace was built in the second half of the 19th century and saw the visit of some truly illustrious guests. Now, unfortunately, no visitors are allowed because the palace was severely damaged in the Second World War and hasn't been fully restored ever since. In 1885, the Prince of Wales, later Edward VII, came to visit, which was quite a press sensation at the time in Hungary, because the prince was not only visiting Hungarian aristocracy, but some nearby brothels as well. Even more illustrious guests were Franz Joseph, Emperor of Austria and King of Hungary, and his wife Sisi. Now, Sisi loved Hungary and Hungarians loved her, but that is a topic for another video. The end of the Second World War brought a new era and destroyed the old elite. The Soviet communists invaded Hungary, and it was their goal to ruin the former ruling class. All of their estates were confiscated and their castles robbed, but that was not the worst part. Several aristocrats were imprisoned, deported, tortured, or even killed for no other reason than being aristocrats. Count István Károlyi was captured by the communists in Budapest, and he was going to be deported to Siberia. Although the communists agitated against the nobility, he was still rescued by his own servants, and therefore he managed to flee the country. Another member of the family, Countess Margit Károlyi, was staying in their countryside castle when the communists came. She refused to leave the country like her husband and children had already done, and first she was forced by the communists to live in the stable of their former castle. Later she was moved to a small cottage next to the castle, and she had to live the rest of her life in these humiliating circumstances.